All right, welcome back. We are now recording this. The idea is that this is now the report out of the group, so we're going to be making this recording available. We didn't record the other groups, the subgroups talking. So let's just get right to it. I'm going to ask each of the facilitators to take 5 minutes and summarize what you've been talking about. So we'll start with fiscal health and sustainability and Shane Kavanaugh. Shane?
Good. All right. Thank you. Yes, in fact, my group kindly gave me the opportunity to practice my speech right before we jumped in. So I want to thank my group for that. And if any of my group, if I missed something here, please do let me know. So I think kind of a first thing we wanted to, I guess I'll raise is that we kind of agreed here that we need to recognize that local governments are a heterogeneous group, meaning there is no average local governments. When we talk about the health of fiscal health of local governments, this is a lot of variation underlying that. So now, as you might guess, in 40 minutes, we covered a pretty wide variety of different topics. So my goal here was to boil this down to like some, we'll call them first principle types of questions that we could grapple with. And one of those first principle types of questions essentially relates to the principle of subsidiarity. So we talked a lot about the idea that local governments are taking on a more and different services than they have in the past. Perhaps as the federal government sheds some kind of responsibilities, those may trickle down to local government. So, but at the same time, there are also things happening at the state level that are reducing the autonomy of local governments in important ways, like perhaps tax limitations or limitations of local governments to get involved in lobbying, which seems to, we'll call it, act against the principle of subsidiarity. So these two things don't match up, right? So that is a kind of, I guess, first principles research question, like to what extent does local autonomy produce good results? What is the right way to allocate or to, we'll call it, locate different services or responsibilities and funding mechanisms at different levels. So that would be our kind of, we'll call it first principles conclusion. And then the second first principles question really arrives is kind of, we'll call it, orients around this idea that at heart, local finance is a collective action problem that is asking, well, how do we really allocate a shared resource, which is the public's tax money, towards some set of public goods that people would not otherwise fund on their own. And so the kind of the first principles question here is that our way of doing that seems to kind of be getting challenged that the way we've done it traditionally. So how do we kind of step back and think about how we are choosing to spend public money? Where is it appropriate to spend more money? Or where is it appropriate to just spend money differently? And just to kind of give you an example of like kind of some of the specific comments that were made, we've talked about like at what point, is local government really under-resourced versus they just need to use the money they have differently, or maybe they need to first prove to their public that they are an adequate steward of the money and deserving of more, right? Because people may have legitimate concerns about whether or not they ought to be funding their local government at higher levels. They may not, also the point was made, they may not really understand like the kind of, we'll call it full spectrum of how government, federal to local, is funded. So it may not, it's not always, it's a little opaque, shall we say. So folks may, I think the point was made, like their local government like quite a bit and the services they get locally, but perhaps not realize that some of those services are funded by transfers from local governments. Those were kind of summary the three big points. So just real quick recap is one, local government is a heterogeneous group. Second, first principle question is about the principle of subsidiarity and like where do we locate these decisions within the hierarchy of state, local, and federal government, and kind of inherent the principle of subsidiarity is like kind of you should locate them further down to the extent that's possible. And then, because that does seem to be what's happening in many ways, intentionally or not. And then lastly is this kind of, we'll call it collective action problem we have called public finance, and how do we allocate our scarce local resources to various public goods, and what is the best way to go about doing that in light of public concerns about fairness, how money is used, value created, and those sorts of things.
Great. Thanks, Shane. 4 minutes, 26 seconds. Great job. All right, next, David Swindell.
We had a really great set of conversations. And interestingly, there's some really nice complementarity to what Shane was just reporting out from his group. One thing, we started with the principle of the perspective that while trust is at record lows for the federal government, lowering for the states, it's still pretty strong, but beginning to erode even at the local level. So we're in by this focus of the local level, we have the best chance for identifying tools and opportunities for ways in which local governments can actually achieve some defensive maneuvers first to stave off the decline, but also maybe even encourage growth in trust in coming years. So one of the foci is on the governmental institutions themselves. What can governments do? And this actually is where you see a lot of, I think, a lot of complementarity with what Shane was just talking about in terms of like the budget, trying to make sure that citizens understand what is they're paying for, what is that they're getting, ways of can we identify mechanisms or practices in which citizens are, first off, engaging in the process, citizen participatory budgeting activities, meaningful activities like that, but also understanding the budget and the things that we're spending on in terms of a per capita mechanism that brings it home more to them to understand what their taxes are actually paying for. A lot of that disconnect that people have with regards to why the sales tax is liked and the income tax isn't, is because we don't break the income tax down into the individual constituent parts of what they're paying for. And if we could bridge that gap, this has been a topic in public finance for a long time, we would be able to help assuage some of that ignorance, which undermines trust. So that was one area. Another area that focuses on local governments and what the local governments can do is also how can we actually envision alternative ways for government to meet people where they are. One of the things that I think is Peggy that mentioned, instead of trying to have town hall meetings, rather go to the dog park, right? That's where the citizens go, to the people, go to the soccer games, go to where they are and engage them there. And that's kind of an active thing that local government can do in terms of trying to reach out to citizens. A more passive way of doing that is utilizing AI tools, other kinds of passive data gathering information, like I know some companies that try to get the pulse of a community by looking at social media trends, things of that nature. So having both those passive and active ways that government can then try to tailor what it is that they're focusing on when they go out and actually engage with citizens at where the citizens are located. So that was one side of our discussions, really kind of fell into that broad umbrella of what the governments can do, the local governments can do. The other side really focused on the citizens. What can we do to encourage citizens to be citizens again? This is, a lot of folks have just checked out, and we got into some discussions with regards to educational opportunities. Part of that was participating in some of these budget exercises, for instance, learning about how the budget works, understanding what the limitations are. If you're going to pay for this, you're not going to be able to pay for that, what the trade-offs are, and engaging with one another. That was another component of this, that it's not just engaging with the government, that's certainly part of it, but also engaging with their neighbors in a collective action to solve some of these issues, whether it's budget, whether it's affordable housing, whether it's some other particular kind of service that's going on in their community. So those were the main, I think, the thrusts of where we're going. A lot of specifics, and we got a lot of notes with regards to the things that we can actually jump into, and a lot of very good research opportunities that we could pursue. And I think some, like I said, that were very complementary to what Shane's already talked about. And I bet we'll probably have some complementarities with some of the other groups as well. So I'll stop there. But if anybody in the trust group wants to add anything, please feel free to jump in.
40 seconds. All right.
Okay. Thanks, y'all.
Thank you. Craig. Greg.
Sorry about that. Speaking of emerging technologies, my Wi-Fi is slowing down. And I tried using a Google Doc thing, and that blew up as well. So maybe I should have been the person selected for covering this topic. So we had obviously 2 sessions, and we tried to break. I tried to break the conversation down into sort of 3 buckets. One is like what are some technology related issues that local governments are grappling with? What are the challenges? And then what may then be some research questions that come of that? And it was interesting because, not surprisingly, generative AI comes up as this emerging technology. There were questions about or concerns about financial ERP systems, some permit review stuff. And a lot of the conversation really had to do with the fact that vendors today tend to be setting the parameters for information dissemination. There's clearly these information asymmetries. And that's putting local governments in a sort of in a challenging position. So what's driving that, of course, is the lack of competition among vendors. The other challenge with respect to AI is, or technology, is there was a concern that technology is driving the process rather than the other way around. A comment was made also about, not only are local governments sort of at the mercy of a few vendors offering services. Those vendors seem to be merging over time, so you have even few. And even in the office, how are staff utilizing ChatGPT? And so now, as a manager, you're sort of at the mercy of what and how your staff are utilizing ChatGPT without having an overarching policy related to that. So some of the research questions that came out of this were, how can we research and evaluate vendor models? There was an interest in this idea of developing case studies, best practices in ERP systems. There was a lot of interest in or expressed about like how are we as researchers able to understand what local governments are doing in the AI space. There's been a cutback in the amount of survey work that's being done by these national organizations, League of Cities, et cetera. And then there's always that lag time between what it is folks are doing, what they want to know, and publications, which are usually about a 2 or 3 year time lag. And so how might we be able to bridge some of those time gaps? I thought another interesting observation made with respect to some research questions is, and Aaron in particular sort of brought this up, and that is, I love this question. How do managers navigate trade-offs of values in relation to adoptions of new technologies? And there's a lot to work on within that question. I mean, that could be a book right there. So as you can see, there are some questions with respect to technology that have been talked about, have existed for some time, right? These information asymmetries between service providers and those who are recipients of those services, both internally as well as externally. And then there are these emerging questions about what we all see. If you're not using it already, we're more than likely going to see adoptions of newer technologies, generative AI, your chat GPTs, et cetera. What does that look like? And what are some of the trade-offs associated with that? And I think those are some of the big questions. And I'll shut up before my internet system decides to shut down again. So thank you.
Thanks, Craig. Carl, preemption.
Okay, well, we had two sets of great conversations, and not surprisingly, there are some overlaps with some of the points that have already been shared by my colleagues. 5 kind of general areas where we had some spirited conversations. I think, first of all, we need to know more about the effects of preemption or non-preemption. We know over time which areas have been targets of the preemptors. We don't know with what effects, for example, a preemption on broadband authority has had on local governments and on the citizens and businesses in those communities. And so there are a number of related questions. We're seeing the same sort of thing with respect to tax authority or DEI. And more needs to be done in shaping those effect-related questions. And secondly, that would be one means to do a better job of educating policymakers and the public around preemption. What is preemption? And there are different definitions depending on whether you're talking to an attorney or a social scientist. And there are my eye glaze over sorts of possibilities when you start talking about home rule and state control. But more could be done in educating the public in terms of the impacts of these preemptions, where they come from, and oftentimes at the state or the county or the municipality is not at the initiating end, but at the receiving end. Third point was that we were seeing more and more about the political implications of preemption, whether it's retaliation along partisan lines, but we need to be mindful of some of those effects. For example, 7 or 8 states have adopted DOGE commissions, and some of those states are looking at preemption as a way to promote efficiency. Really? Well, where's the evidence that that occurs? And so that was the third. And then let's say 4. We need to know about strategies for navigating the preemptions, both strategies that have proven successful in pushing back and preventing preemptions, but also strategies for making preemptions work where that has taken place and if that is possible. Again, this is part of the education component, but there's a need for more case studies of successful efforts. For example, Colorado effort to push back broadband preemption, and several others have been noted as examples of what municipal leagues and county associations need by way as helpful ammunition as they fight the good fight. So those are highlights. Any sins of omission or commission? Colleagues, please speak up.
Thank you, Carl. Gerald, you're last up.
All right, thank you. We had a couple of broad topics that we discussed, starting off with regulatory and cultural environment. Here and in a couple of other areas, there was a desire for both quantitative and qualitative data, including case studies. And on some of those, it was to look at the impact of policies and whether they were actually accomplishing what we think they are accomplishing. So a few examples of those were residency requirements, specifically residency requirements and city managers as an example. Does requiring the city manager to live in the community result in lower well-being of the city manager? Do flexible work arrangements actually have a benefit to attracting and retaining talent? Do procurement policies that have equity-based goals actually achieve those goals? And with civil service, is it more myth or tradition that we have ascribed the problems of recruiting to the fact that there is a civil service system and that slows everything down? Or is it more that, we've always done it that way, or the workflow itself is just cumbersome and that needs to be addressed in some fashion? DEI was brought up primarily from the standpoint of how governments are dealing with the microscope that is being put on that right now and what impacts they are still able to achieve in terms of equity and inclusion and morale within their organizations. On collaborations, there was particular attention paid to colleges, but also K through 12 institutions, and looking at whether, let's say, the counselors within those organizations are aware of the public sector opportunities that are out there, and whether there is data sharing going on between those institutions that are graduating the next crop of potential employees and the employers to make sure that there is a match between the skills that are being developed and the openings that, again, perhaps they're not even aware exist. There were some more details on that, but I want to make sure to get to some of these others. On succession planning, there was an interest in both measuring the impact of not having a succession plan in place and what the benefit is of having a succession plan in place. And then on policing, again, looking at some of the policy implications, what is the effect of having various approaches to policing, whether that's community policing, broken windows policing, alternative response with mental health providers, what types of training are being provided and whether those are effective, and what kinds of tech tools, whether that's non-lethal weapons, body cams, etc., has on the effectiveness. Finally, there was a lot of discussion on messaging around public service, making sure that people understand that it's not simply a job, it's an adventure. It's something that can be personally motivating because you are serving the greater public. But again, that's not necessarily something that we have branded well, and how we can track or report effective branding campaigns and communicate to people who are thinking that they want to cycle through multiple jobs in the course of their working lives, that it's possible to work in the public sector and move around either within one organization multiple times or within different public sector organizations multiple times and still find something new, different, and satisfying with that. And the communication challenge finally was on the federal side in reacting to the DOGE fraud, waste, and abuse argument to show that whether it's through a coordinated advertising campaign, through ICMA, NLC, or other associations, etc., that there is a value to public sector careers, and that the blame game is not productive. So I think that's about it.
Thank you, Gerald. It's 24 after the hour, 6 minutes. Any thoughts, comments? So next steps, Jillian McGuffey's with her AI friends are taking good notes. We have a recording here. We'll distill this down to a document over the next couple weeks and share that widely. I'm sorry.
Mike wanted to jump in. Mike,
I'm sorry, Mike, go ahead. Thank you, Nancy.
Thanks, Nancy and Wally. Wally, this is more of a coordination question for you as sort of our conductor of this vast orchestra. There, this is these ideas that are coming out today are from a research group, and they closely align with each of the working groups that are part of your local government group. And I'm wondering what is the coordination now here between my group that I'm co-chairing is the Fiscal Health and Sustainability Group. So what's the relationship between that group and the one that Shane is reporting on today, which has the same title?
So this is all under a research committee under the local government working group in Napa. And so the group that you're chairing is another one of those committees. And so we're trying to keep all of them talking to one another. And so now that we're entering the August doldrums, we'll all get back together here either end of August, 1st of September to continue to coordinate, facilitate this. But the idea of a research agenda on these topics more broadly is meant to connect the academics and the association research staff, because several of them are on the call today and they have been part of this research committee. So you're right, it's a careful dance to keep everything integrated, but you know, there's a commitment to do that. Nancy and Jillian and Joe Mitchell from the Academy are also helping make sure that we keep all this going together, because we don't want to just talk. We want to try to move these issues forward in substantial ways. So we'll continue to do that. I hope that answers your question, Mike.
Well, we're already beginning our programming part of it and would like to either connect with the research side with what Shane was just presenting, or with you as sort of the umbrella person. So I just need some coordination direction, that's all.
Sure, and we need to get all the chairs together again.
Okay.
Either at the end of August or 1st of September. This was hard to pull off on the last day of July. I appreciate everyone coming together, but you know, the commitment is that we're going to keep this stitched together, and Nancy and her team at the Academy, you know, are really the center point of all
Okay,
that.
thank
But
you.
thank you very much for the question. So we'll have a summary of this. We'll share that with this group. We'll get, you know, this is all on, for those of you not aware, this is all under the umbrella of the local government working group at the Academy. So we're trying to help the Academy with issues in local government, with involving fellows, involving other practitioners, involving academics, involving the staff of the local government associations. So it's been a large undertaking, but it is all starting to come together, and really appreciate everyone's time this afternoon in having this discussion. Any final thoughts, words, comments?
Just wanted to thank you, Wally, for your continuing leadership of all this local government work. I cannot do it without you. So many, many thanks to you.
Thank you. All right, well, enjoy the rest of your summer, everybody, and stay tuned, more to come.